think it's awful what happened yesterday. We think it's abuse of power.
I gotta stand. I don't care if they kill me today.
Supporters of President Trump reacting to an unprecedented move. The FBI executed a search warrant on property belonging to a former president.
I personally approved the decision to seek a search warrant in this matter.
It's another day in paradise. This was a strange day.
Unsealed court documents reveal the FBI took 11 sets of classified records from the president's Mar-a-Lago home, ranging from top secret to sensitive compartmented information, which means if the information became public, it'd harm U.S. interests. The FBI also seized potential presidential records, like the order pardoning Roger Stone, Trump's political ally, and information about the president of France. Trump and some of his allies say the documents were all declassified before he left office, but
regardless of the content of the documents, whether they're classified or not, federal presidential records are the people's property.
Some archivists, like Bob Clark, who are specially trained in preserving original material and helping people obtain it, are raising the red flag on presidential records.
Once a president transitions out of office, at the moment that that person is no longer president, they become the legal property of the National Archives and their responsibility.
In fact, the National Archives and Records Administration, which is like the nation's filing cabinet, has been working to obtain Trump's presidential records since he left office in January of 2021. According to a statement, NARA did receive some of Trump's presidential records that month, including some paper records torn up by the president himself. A year later, NARA arranged to transport 15 boxes of presidential records from Mar-a-Lago to Washington, with understanding that Trump's representatives would continue looking for any other records to turn over. Amid all of the back and forth, we wondered, why do presidential records belong to National Archives? For starters, it's the law. According to the Presidential Records Act of 1978, quote, any documentary materials relating to the political activities of the president or members of the president's staff, but only if such activities relate to or have a direct effect on duties of the president, are the people's property. Not all materials make the cut.
It could be, massive quantities of mail from the public, requests for birthday greetings, things like that are just so vast in number but have so little informational value that they don't have long-term permanent archival value. But prior approval is required to do that.
Clark says Congress's drafting of the Presidential Records Act guaranteed that these records would be accessible to the public for transparency, accountability, and historical research. Before this law came into play, there were no rules on how to manage presidential records. They were actually considered private property. From President Warren G. Harding's wife claiming to have burned all his records to President Abraham Lincoln's son, Robert Todd Lincoln, burning all his father's war letters, anything could go. Until
I, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, do solemnly swear.
FDR took a different approach.
It was Franklin Roosevelt who set the precedent of deeding them as a gift to the American people to be in the possession and custody of the National Archives. FDR created the Presidential Library.
So why enact the law?
The reason why the Presidential Records Act was necessary has one very simple explanation: Richard Nixon.
In recent months, members of my administration and officials of the Committee for the Re-election of the President, including some of my closest friends and most trusted aides, have been charged with involvement in what has come to be known as the Watergate affair.
Congress was understandably concerned as a result of their investigations into Watergate that because the papers and tapes were technically Nixon's personal property under the way the law was contrived at the time, they were concerned that the papers and tapes would be taken with Nixon, and in fact Nixon wanted them to go with him to Yorba Linda when he resigned from office. Congress passed the Presidential Recordings and Materials Preservation Act in 1974 that essentially declared that this previously personal property of Richard Nixon's was now federal property. It was just like a taking of part of your yard to build a highway. But it was the first time that Congress had asserted itself over presidential papers and records like that.
Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter were the last presidents whose records were their own. Ronald Reagan's were the first Presidential Records Act library records. Barack Obama's will be the first fully digital presidential library.
Up to this point, there has always been this kind of delicate dance that happens, and it has to be well-timed and well-practiced and ably executed like it has always been up to this point. But the point that I would make is that the Presidential Records Act depends on the goodwill of those involved for the successful execution of it.
Goodwill that has seemingly soured as what has historically been a run-of-the-mill transfer of records turns into controversy.
How do you feel, Mr. Trump? How do you feel?
I think that amidst all of the noise over what is where, it's important for the American people to know that this is their property, regardless of the content of the documents, whether they're classified or not. Federal presidential records are the people's property.
Lauren Magarino, Newsy.